Just want to get my screen shared here just a second. There it is. All right. We have an audio issue, but that's all right. So lesson 4 today, we are continuing in our endeavor to learn more about federal aviation regulations. And today we do a lot of regulations out of Part 91. You're familiar with a lot of these regulations already, but we need to make sure that you have a sound understanding for obviously taking the knowledge exam later, but also because a lot of these are operational and you have to know these to operate in the airspace or the airport environment. And of course, your examiner is going to be asking you a lot of tough questions where you just have to know the regulations very well. There might be some regulations that it's okay to look up, but a lot of these, you just got to know them on that. So let's get going on our lesson today. And we're going to start off, kind of break these up into their different subparts. We're starting in subpart A on general rules. We're kind of just starting right at the beginning of part 91 and working our way through it here. And with our regulations today, our normal group activity would be the FAR game. Probably going to have to push that online because of the weather delay we had this morning. So there will be an extra credit opportunity, and I'll get some messages out to you after class today explaining how you can complete that opportunity. Oh, and by the way, only 21 of you found the Hinman violation extra credit opportunity. That was part of Group B there. So keep looking for extra credit. Remember, it does go toward your assignment scores. Just keep that in mind. All right, here we go with some general rules and a discussion board for you. Talking about this section of the FARs. Last time we met, we did talk about the operational authority being the entity that has the ability to schedule or request a flight or cancel a flight. Now we talk about the authority of the pilot in command to conduct the flight. It's a whole different critter here, okay? This is the person that is responsible and is the final authority for the operation of the aircraft. The boss might be sitting in the back, and the boss might say, all right, I want to go to Miami instead of Charlotte, North Carolina. And the pilot command has to say, all right, well, Miami has a hurricane coming up. We're not going in there. Okay. That's pilot command authority. So just keep in mind, it's not the same as operational control. Okay. And we're going to pull up do a lot of top hat questions today. Probably got about 30 to 40 top hat questions for you to interact with today. All right. All right, here we go with top hat question, and this does concern understanding the difference between pilot command and operational control definitions here. So identify what would be operational control in the statement below. All right, and most of you did a good job with that one. Now that choice A, it says, I am the pilot command. So And I told you before, operational control is not pilot and command. Those are two different critters. Right? All right, nice job. All right, airworthiness determination. As a pilot, you have to make sure that you are flying an airworthy aircraft. Remember, we talked about the airworthiness certificate already, which is just an FAA document that grants authorization for flight provided the aircraft has been maintained and registered in the US. So that's why we think about the aircraft being maintained as part of the airworthiness. Being maintained does mean we have maintenance inspections that are done on the aircraft. That's half of it. The other half is a pre-flight inspection by the pilot. Now, here's the thing that's going to be different for a lot of you. Right now, you are flying in the Western world of aviation, where we do a lot of things for you behind the scenes. Out in the real world, it's called general aviation out there. You would be responsible for looking through the logbook of the aircraft you're going to fly, making sure that it does have all of its required inspections done, maintenance has been done, etc. That's in addition to your walk around. So here's the graph that it looks like here. There's really 6 different areas of the regulations that specify what a pilot needs to do to determine airworthiness. Let's start with the aircraft logbook evidence over here. First, we're looking for the inspections that are completed. AVIATES is the typical acronym that we use for these inspections. Next would be airworthiness directives. They've been complied with as well as logged. And the third one here is preventive maintenance, alterations, and inoperative equipment has been logged properly in the logbook. That's something you don't normally do. It's something that we have you do at the check ride point because the examiner is asking you to prove airworthiness. Okay? But this is only half of it here. In addition to the aircraft having been maintained properly, you have to do the pre-flight inspection. And the reason you're doing that pre-flight inspection is because you're trying to find things that are wrong with the airplane. You know you just can't stop and pull off at a cloud and figure something out if it's broken, right? You're just making sure everything works properly on there. And obviously the regs do talk about the need for documents on board. So SPARROW is the typical acronym that we're using. You should already be familiar with that. Required equipment. You should be familiar with 91.205, VFR day, VFR night, and IFR equipment. Of course, we have our various acronyms for those. You should be familiar. I'm not going to teach you those. If you haven't learned them already, okay, get them learned. You do need to know them, right? Especially at the commercial pilot level, you are just expected to automatically know that list. And no, the examiner is probably not going to ask you to jot that list down on paper either, right? You just have to have that operational knowledge of what is required. The last bit is the inoperative equipment that's not required for flight. That has to be dealt with in some way, possibly disabling it, removing it, placarding it, and then a safe determination has to be made. So there's really 6 different things that have to be done in order for you to determine airworthiness. And if any one of those 6 does not fit the bill here, then we are looking at an airplane that's not airworthy. This means that the airworthiness certificate is not valid for flight. Remember that airworthiness is only valid if the aircraft is maintained and registered in the US. Okay? So you either have to fix the airplane or get the special flight permit. Otherwise, if all 6 of these areas are good, then your airplane is okay to fly. Your standard airworthiness is valid for that flight. You have authorization from the FAA to conduct flight. All right, and we'll get into some more of those inspections a little bit later in the regs here. Continuing on in subpart A, dealing with dropping objects. The FAA's got interesting regulations because they often tell you, well, you can't do something. And then they give you the exception to the rule. Right? And this is one of those examples here with dropping objects. They say, no, you can't do it. But then they come back and say, unless you do something else. Well, unless you take precautions to avoid injury or damage to property, then you can drop things from the airplane. So the FAA's got an interesting way of dealing with regs. Okay, so let's try a top hat question here. Dealing with dropping objects from airplane. 45 seconds here. All right, see how you did? And you all got it right. Wonderful. Nice job. All right, moving on. Portable electronic devices. So the first thing that the reg states is they're not allowed for use for air carrier operations. They're not allowed for use for IFR operations. And you're possibly there thinking, well, isn't my iPad or my electronic flight bag a portable electronic device? And the answer is yes, it is. So how come I can use that when I go IFR? And that's because as the pilot in command or the operator, if you have made a determination that the device does not interfere with navigation or communication systems, then it may be allowed for use. So if you got a passenger that brings something that you're not familiar with, you can certainly do a quick test to make sure it doesn't interfere with anything, and then you can allow it for use. In the regulation, there are some items that are automatically exempt that can be automatically used, and they list such things as electric shaver, a heart pacemaker, and a few other items there. You should be familiar with that list. You can't exactly tell someone, turn off your heart pacemaker. It just doesn't work that way. All right, subpart B deals with flight rules. These are the ones you pretty much you got to know these rules here. They apply while you're actually flying the airplane. Pre-flight action is the first bit. You are responsible for knowing certain elements, obtaining information about your flight. And we break it up into two areas. The first one is if it's an IFR flight or a flight not in the vicinity of the airport. So interesting word here, vicinity of the airport, it's not defined in the FARs anywhere. My only guidance to you is from our METAR and TAF reports. METARs and TAF will go out to 5 miles. That's my only guidance, all right? So when we talk about in the vicinity of the airport, in my opinion, if you're within 5 miles of the airport, you're in the vicinity of it. You go beyond 5, you're no longer in the vicinity. Okay. All right, so if you are going away from the airport or IFR flight, you must get weather reports and forecasts for the time of the flight. You must understand your fuel requirements. How much do you need versus how much do you have? What's your burn rate? You must have alternatives if your planned flight cannot be completed. And this should also include days where, potential for a crosswind makes your runway no longer usable. Any known delays usually be passed along in your pre-flight briefing. So this is required information for IFR and anything that's not in the vicinity of the airport. Regardless, every single flight, though, you must know the runway length for the runway you intend to use, and you must know your takeoff and landing performance. I don't care how you remember it. Some people might use the WCRAFT acronym. There's another one here, whoop drag. So it really doesn't matter which one you use. I don't care. But you need to know what is required pre-flight information. And so here's your top hat question. True or false? A flight only in the traffic pattern requires the pilot to get weather reports and forecasts. Wow, true or false? So it's an interesting question. I'm going to say it's a gray area. I like when regs are black and white, Definitely a gray area, because we do have a reg elsewhere that says you got to become familiar with all available information for any flight. Then we have this reg that says, well, if you're staying near the airport, you don't need weather forecasts and reports. So we'll go with false on this answer here. All right. You could make the argument to the FAA, I don't need to get a weather report. I'm just up in the traffic pattern real quick. Still a gray area though. Moving on with our subpart B regulations, seat belts. Keep in mind we're talking about the lap belt. It goes over your hips. We're not talking about a shoulder harness here. When a crew member is at their station, they need to wear the seatbelt at all times. Now, they can take it off if they need to perform duties. Otherwise, when they sit down, they put on the seatbelt. Now, the shoulder harness, that has to be worn for takeoff and landing. Now, there are some aircraft where you have a separate lap belt and shoulder harness. And then you just connect the two together, all right? Pre-flight briefings. Part 91 regs do require you to talk about the use of seat belts, the how to use them and when to use them with any passengers on board the aircraft. Interestingly enough, it doesn't say anything about emergency exits. We always brief those anyway, but the regs in Part 91 do not state that. It is certainly possible for aircraft to fly in formation with one another. In order to do this, there must be a prior arrangement with the pilot command of each aircraft for the formation. There's one caveat, that you may not carry passengers for hire while flying in formation. Remember, for hire passenger, someone's paying to go from point A to point B. Let's do a top hat question here. See how much you understand this one. True or false? You have a professional photographer with an assistant on board and intend to fly in formation with another airplane for a photo shoot. Both of the pilot commands have agreed to the formation flight. Is this flight allowed?
Are they paying you to fly, or like the photographer?
You got to read it into the question there, right? They're on board to photograph the other aircraft. Yeah, a few seconds here. So normally you would pay the photographer to be on board the airplane for a photo shoot. So we got to ask ourselves, is the photographer and the assistant being transported for hire from point A to point B? And they're not. They're just there for a photo shoot. They're shooting pictures of the other aircraft in formation. So this flight is allowed, right? Because there's not a for hire operation going on with the passengers. Moving on to right-of-way rules. Very important that you maintain a proper lookout. Remember, you're always required to fly the airplane. That's your first responsibility. Your second responsibility is to see and avoid. See and avoid other traffic. You have to know the rules and how to avoid them. In general, any aircraft in distress always has the right of way. And then the second line would be any least maneuverable aircraft has the right of way. It's kind of a hierarchy of rules. Those are the number 1 and 2 rules. An overtaking aircraft, the slower aircraft has right of way. You must overtake on the right. Converging aircraft, the aircraft on the right has the right of way. You normally pass behind the aircraft, and head on, neither aircraft has right of way. So these are our general rules that, a lot of things that we're going over today you've already learned as a private pilot, so we're just helping to reinforce them. Got several Top Hat questions about this. I'm going to show you a picture of another aircraft. You're going to be in the Cirrus aircraft, and you got to decide who has right of way. So here's your first picture, 45 seconds. You're in the Cirrus again. The Cessna is on your left, and you can see its direction of flight is from your left side to your right side. Who has right of way? All right, see how you did here. You always yield to the right. You are to the right. You have right of way. That's correct. The other aircraft does not. Okay, next one. Very similar situation. Who has right of way? And you got that one correct. The glider is least maneuverable, cannot hold altitude, so it's considered less maneuverable than you are. Who's got right away? This is a refueling operation. Are they plowing the ramp out there? Blowing it off? Jeez. All right, a refueling operation. While they're tethered together, they are less maneuverable. Let's try another one. Who's got right away? You're flying through the clouds. That's what you see. All right, the other aircraft is least maneuverable. So you got that one right. Nice job. How about this one? We have Mooney aircraft and the Cirrus. Who's got right away? And the other aircraft is to your right. When you're same class of aircraft, then we can determine the right-of-way rules very easily. Nice job. A couple more for you. I hope you can recognize the flame on that. Engine is not responding too well. So the other aircraft with the engine on fire there has got the right of way. They're in an emergency. This is an interesting one here. The helicopter is in cruise flight. And that's important to know here. It's not hovering, it's in cruise flight. Right, so when a helicopter is in cruise flight, the FAA has determined that the maneuverability of that helicopter is the same as an airplane. So same maneuverability of both the aircraft, yield to the right. That means the helicopter has to yield to you as you have the right of way. If it was a hovering flight, then it's a lot more maneuverable than you are. All right, here's another interesting one for you. That is an electric aircraft. solar-powered electric aircraft. You are looking at the tail of it as it's trying to fly away from you. Oh, the other aircraft is a slow-moving airplane. You have to yield to the right side. All right, last one. We're looking at the front end of an airplane. You should recognize the head-on situation. No one has right of way. Both alter course to the right. All right. Next area is airspeed. Look at maximum airspeeds here. You can see how well you know these. So when we look at our different airspeeds, we are looking at one area that is above 10,000 feet. There's another speed when you're below 10,000 feet. And then if you're within Delta and Charlie or below Bravo, there's another speed restriction on that. So those are the little areas that we're going to look at here. I'm going to start with maximum indicated airspeed, and we are in the purple area, 10,000 MSL and above. You got some choices down there. We like to fly fast when we're above 10,000 feet. All right, ooh, a bit of a split there. So the correct answer is less than Mach 1. We do like to fly fast, but we can't do sonic booms over the continental US. Now, military aircraft can do it in special areas, but otherwise we cannot do that. So we gotta be less than Mach 1. You get beyond the shore, then we're allowed to accelerate above Mach 1. Maximum indicated airspeed. This area is within class Bravo below 10,000 feet. You're inside the Bravo, but you're below 10,000 feet. Okay, see how you did here. No, big split there. If you indicated 250 knots, that would be correct. There are no speed restrictions in Bravo airspace. Speed restriction that's applied is when you're below 10,000 feet, you have to be no faster than 250. But there's no speed restrictions inside the Bravo, so we just default back to 250 there. All right, the next one. Now we're going to be within Charlie and Delta primary areas. We're going to be below the Bravo shelf. $200 knots. That is correct. Well done. Okay. I'm going to get through a few more things here. Subpart B, clearances. When given by ATC, clearances or instructions, they need to be followed. Now, of course, you as pilot command are responsible for the safe operation of the aircraft. And you might be in a situation where it's an emergency and you can't comply with instructions. Okay. Or you got to avoid traffic and you can't comply with instructions because you're avoiding traffic. So those are allowed. You have to obviously tell ATC your situation as soon as possible. There's also times where you just can't comply with instruction because it would take you into a dangerous area or violate FARs. You know, I've had ATC tell me many times, you know, turn right to this heading and boom, there's a cloud there. I can't do it. You got to tell them I'm unable to comply and why. You may not follow clearances for another aircraft. When you get into busy airspace areas, you might be instructed to follow the Boeing 737. Right, and that's your instruction. Okay? If the Boeing 737 is cleared to land, you are not cleared to land. You still need your own clearance. Light gun signals. Not only do we have good radio communication ability, most of the time we can get ATC up on the phone if we happen to know the phone number. So the likelihood of you needing light gun signals is probably diminishing every year. But you're still asked these questions on the knowledge exam. And the examiner can still ask you a question on the oral exam. So we're going to look at on the ground first. I'm going to show you some videos. Okay. And let's see how well you can get through these. Okay, so we're on the ground. My video is gone. Hold on a second. What's going on here? All right, there we go. We'll do this one here. All right, see how we did here. I didn't start the question. There we go. So still flashing red. And anytime something's red, especially flashing, they're trying to get your attention. Usually when it's flashing, it's some sort of dangerous situation going on. All right, see how you did here. Well, a lot of splits. Okay, so we are here in a dangerous situation, being on an active runway. We need to get off of it. Stop here would be a steady red, like a stop light. Pick another random one here. We won't go over all of these, but we'll do several of them. Okay, here's our next light gun signal. Ha, I already told you that one. Never mind. We pick another random one. All right, we'll pick this one here. Yeah, the alternating red and green is going to be that use caution one. All right, let's try a few airborne light gun signals. Okay. When you go back and review these slides, you can go through all the light gun signals there. So these are the ones that are in the air. So you're in the air this time, and you get this red-green alternating signal. All right, again, use caution. All right. One more random one here. It's probably the one you ought to know. The one you ought to know, steady green, clear to land. Yeah. So for the exam that comes up in several weeks, you're going to want to know all the light gun signals there on that. All right, let's keep going here. See if we can get through a few more of these and then take a quick break. Airspace requirements. We're flying in Class Charlie airspace, or even above the Charlie airspace. We may be required to have certain equipment. So anytime you're inside the airspace, we need our surveillance equipment. So both the Mode C and ADS-B out inside the airspace. Also above the airspace, you need that same surveillance equipment. When you're in the airspace, you need two-way radio. I should just clarify the notes here. Two-way radio in Class C. Not above it, but in it. Interestingly, if I go below a shelf, I don't need any equipment. We all know we got to establish the call sign with the airport. But here's the thing you may not understand. There could be a satellite airport operating within the primary surface area. If an airplane departs from that airport, they need to contact ATC as soon as practical after departing. So in the graphic over here, there's a non-towered field, a private airstrip that's inside the primary area. So anybody over there at that airport is going to have to call up the tower once they depart, let them know they're departing. In Bravo airspace, we need two-way radio equipment inside the airspace. A VOR, obviously, if you're IFR. And then within 30 miles of the primary airport, you need surveillance equipment, both the Mode C transponder and ADS-B out. And you already know we need a clearance to enter, whether we're IFR or VFR. So not really much new here other than just stressing the ADS-B out requirement. That's something that came about just a couple years ago. So let's try a top hat question here. You're planning a VFR flight into Detroit Metro, Class Bravo Airport, January 2nd. Identify all equipment required for this VFR flight. Looks like a lot of you selected the correct ones there. Now, B, C, and D were correct answers, but VOR is not required for a VFR flight. And ADS-B in equipment is also not required. VOT check. Something you should be familiar with as an instrument pilot. There shouldn't be much new here. Just emphasizing that this VOR test facility is located at select airports. You would just discover the location inside the chart supplement. Your big airports will have it. And the facility is going to transmit only one radial. That's the radial 360. It's going to transmit that radial in every single direction. It's not like the VOR, which only transmits radial 360 north side of the airport, right? This is the radial 360 every single direction, which is why when we set up our equipment, we can set it up with the 360 course and verify a from indication. Or we can set up a 180 course, verifying that we have a 2 indication on it. So that's half the check. The other half of the check is making sure the CDI is plus or minus 4 degrees off center. And if you can't remember, is it the 360 or the 180 course? Just remember that the Cessna Aircraft Company made a 182 model. 180 to the station. Kind of a silly way to remember it. Let's try some top hat questions and see if you can determine whether these have passed a VOT check. Did this VOR pass a VOT check? So it did fail. Nice job. The 360 indication should have had a from with it. Next one, try this one. Did this VOR pass a VOT check? All right, hopefully you recognize that it's more than 4 degrees off the center there. Each dot, in this case, is 2 degrees. We know that full scale is 10, so you count the number of dots in there. Each dot is 2 degrees. That's a 7-degree deflection, so that means we have failed. Let's try this last one here. Did the VOR pass the VOT check? Should have recognized that this one passed. It's only 2 degrees off center on that. All right. Essential conversation. It's not a Part 91 regulation, but it does come into the knowledge test questions. There's a requirement in the airlines that below 10,000 feet and on the ground that everyone is doing their assigned duties and there's no not essential conversations or distractions going on. All right, and that will be a good time for us to take a quick break. I know regs are just so exciting, so let's take a quick 5-minute break. Come on back in 5 minutes, and we'll finish up with the rest of everything.